our blessings we ask in your name. A couple of weeks ago, Pastor BJ said all the preachers from Transparent Church on the stage, and he thought it was a great idea to shoot questions from the audience for us to share our testimony. And so, in good Pastor BJ fashion, he left me for that. On purpose. And the question that he asked me was, why do people sit on the sideline when they're destined to be on the front line? That's what he asked me. Because he knows my story. And he knows that that's a big part of my story and a big part of the things that God has done for my life. And so after that day, that question stuck with me. Why do we sit on the sideline when God has destined us for the front line? To get us to the finish line. To be our lifeline through all of these different things. And so today, I didn't know how I was going to work that out. I didn't know where it was going to come from. But I told him the next week, I was like, I'm going to talk about this. I don't know when, but I'm going to talk about that. And so then he put this together and he started talking about activating the power of God and activating the power that God gives you. And so when I was studying and I was trying to put this together for tonight, God just kept saying, you going from the sideline to the front line. You're going from the sideline to the front line. And so he took me to 1 Samuel 17:45 through 47. He took me to 1 Samuel 17:45 through 47. And I'll be looking at the New King James Version. Because I honestly believe that I'm not by myself in this place, where it's a lot of people sitting on the sideline that God has ordained to be on the front line. And so the scripture says, then David said to the Philistines, you come to me with a sword and a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of Philistine to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with the sword or the spear, but for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And so I want to talk about today going from the sideline to the front line. I want to talk about going from the sideline to the front line. All right. And so in this particular scripture, it's talking about David. And it's a statement that David is making. And David has one of the most interesting stories about how the power of God is activated in his life. I love this story because David was on the sidelines, minding his business and staying in his lane. When we first learn about David, it's because Saul didn't follow God's orders, and Samuel is sent by God to Bethlehem to choose one of Jesse's sons as the next king of Israel. In this story, Jesse showed Samuel 7 of his sons that he was most proud of, while David was in the field tending to the sheep, or in this case, on the sideline. David, though he was healthy and bright-eyed and good-looking, was still considered the runt in his father's eyes. I find it real funny how your family and your friends don't notice the power that God has put in you, but complete strangers will. So in 1 Samuel 16, so I want to tell y'all I read the whole book of 1 Samuel, so because I wanted to know all about how David got to the point that he got to. And so in 1 Samuel 16:10 through 13, Samuel tells Jesse that God hasn't chose any of those 7 sons that he brought forth, and he asked for David. And so David comes from the field, and God says, yeah, anoint him. That's the one I want right there. And David was anointed in front of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David at that time. God will anoint you in front of the very ones that thought you were nothing. It says he prepares the table in front of my enemies, in front of my family, in front of my doubters, in front of my haters. He is going to prepare that table, because it doesn't matter what man thinks about us. God always has the final say-so. But what David's father didn't know is the very job that he had him out in the field doing was going to be the very thing that was going to set him up for the future that God had for him, and the divine power that God was going to instill in him. Though David's father thought that he was the runt, he was actually setting him up to be a mighty king with the things that David was learning out there in the field. So let's talk about the sideline. Many people don't like to be on the sideline because they believe that all the action takes place in the game. But there are some significant things that happen while you're on the sideline. The sideline is where most of your life-changing encounters with God happen. This is where God speaks to you and prepares you for the game or the assignment that he has for you. This is where you study and you learn the plays so that you know how to operate when you are called to be in the game. The sideline teaches you how to war differently. It teaches you how to war against those outside influences that cause you to have self-doubt. When you're pulled out the game and you go to the sideline, it's either because you've made a mistake or you need a break and you need to rest. Those are the reasons why you're on the sideline. And if you've made a mistake in the game, you go to the sideline and you have the opportunity to watch your enemies or the outside influences without being directly in contact with them. Because you're not in the game. And your enemies are focused on the other people that are in the game. And so with you sitting on the sideline, you are able to do what we say, study the film. And when you study the film, you're sitting there and you can make moves and you can plan strategy and you can know what you're going to do from point A to point B, and you're able to counterattack your enemies when you get back in the game. It gives you an opportunity to learn their moves and how to move different next time. Somebody say, study the film. Many people lose hope because they made a mistake. But when you have a flaw that is exposed by the enemy, you're able to learn from it. Because you become stronger and you use your experience as fuel to fight harder in the next opportunity that you get. So you can tell your enemy, yeah, you hit me. Yeah, you knocked me down, but I ate that punch. And I'm bouncing on my toes, ready to come back in the fight and get in it again, because now I've learned how to not make that same mistake again. And yeah, you exposed something, but now I use that exposure for my good, and now I'm able to turn that around and I'm able to fight with the very thing that you exposed. If you're sent to the sideline to get rest, that's actually a bonus for you. Think about it. Boxers go back to the sideline in between each round of the fight to rejuvenate themselves, to replenish what they lost, to patch up their wounds, and to get coaching to fight better in the next round. Somebody say, don't throw shade at the sideline. Don't throw shade at the sideline. So let's get back to David. So God gives him the anointing to be the next king of Israel in front of his family. But David doesn't automatically become king. So God will give you the power, but that doesn't mean that it's activated in the moment that he gives you the power. David goes back to the sideline, but God starts to set his plan in motion by putting the spirit of depression over Saul. And Saul starts trying to figure out how he can make himself feel better. So everybody should know that David is a musician. And Saul was trying to figure out what can I do to get rid of this depression, this dark mood that God has put over my life. And so somebody said, well, maybe you can get somebody to play the harp. Maybe you can get a musician because music soothes the soul, right? So somebody told King Saul about a man named David who was known as a musician. And so what happens is that God starts to set this thing in motion, because we never figure out before this happens how David is going to get to Saul. Yeah. But now we know how he gets to Saul, because God is sending him on assignment to soothe the very thing that he put over him. So God will use your downfalls and your disobedience and others to set you on paths towards activation. It is what it is. Everyone has free will and the opportunity to follow God. So if they don't, and that begins your path to activation, then so be it. That's what it is. So Saul heard about David through some servants. And I hear God saying, I'm setting you on your path for activation through what somebody heard and what somebody said about you. Whether it's good or whether it's bad, it don't matter. All I need to do is get your name in the room. That's all I need to do is get your name in the room. And so we don't know before all of this happened how Saul and David are going to be connected, but somebody told somebody else about what David could do, and now his name is in the room. You don't even have to work hard to get is go. So David is still sitting on the sideline, and he's sent by his father to take some food to the soldiers and check on his brothers that are about to go to war with the Philistines and with Goliath. So David, being obedient, he did just that. But when he got there, he heard Goliath setting out his challenges and his terms to the army of Israel. And so in 1 Samuel 17, 8 through 10, it says, then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel, and he said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you will be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that will fight, and we will fight together. So David overhears what Goliath is saying, and the challenge, and he starts to ask questions. And so if you know anything about me, you know I gotta tell the story the way I got it. I gotta tell the story the way I heard it. And so David is like, this is what I imagine. David is like, who is this dude talking all this hot stuff and got everybody running scared? I ain't scared. I ain't never been scared. But if I go kill this joker, then what's in it for me? What I get? If I go save everybody, what do I get? And so in that moment, David's brother got upset at the very thought that David felt like he could do anything in order to help the situation, because again, they thought that David was a runt. He was the youngest, and he wasn't, they didn't think that he was on the same level and of the same stature as what they were. So how dare David think that he can come do anything to change this situation? And so he started asking them questions like, who are you? Why are you even here? Go back to the sideline and mind your business. And so in my mind, David is like, dude, why are you so pressed? All I did was ask a simple question. That's all I did. So somebody went and snitched on David to the king. So David had to go back and explain himself to the king and plead his case. And of course, the king told him all the reasons for why he wouldn't be successful. He told him that he was too young. He told him that he was inexperienced. But how many people know that just because you do the same thing for a long period of time, and that's what everybody doing, that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it effective. That doesn't make it of God just because everybody else is doing it and because we've been doing it over and over and over again. The sheer definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So sometimes God has to call up somebody that's different. Sometimes God has to call up somebody that looks like the underdog and looks like somebody that can't do nothing in a situation in order was David, I would have been like, man, listen, I ain't scared. End of story. I'm not scared. I know I'm small. I know I'm young. I look good too, but I'm also not scared. And so when God is getting ready to activate something in your life, it creates confrontation. When you have been activated, you will walk in the will of God and operate in the spiritual. What God is doing in your life is not easily understood by someone that is walking in the natural. They can't make your favor make sense to them. So they put you down and they make you believe that you're not capable of carrying out the will of God. But David ends up convincing Saul by running his resume. Somebody say, run my resume. So sometimes you have to tell people who you are. And so I felt David in 1 Samuel 17:34-37 when he said, your servant, he's talking about himself, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and I struck it, and I delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and I struck it and I killed it. Your servant, we talking about David, your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. Seeing he has defied the armies of the living God, moreover, David said, the Lord who had delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. So David had to run his resume and say, King Saul, I know you worried about me. I know it don't look like I can do it. I know you don't have that much faith in me. But I tell you what I've already been through has prepared me for this moment. So if you don't get out the way and let me do and activate the power that God has in me, then I can save not only you, but the whole people of Israel and be able to bring everybody to freedom. And be able to defeat the Philistines and be able to do something that every other man in the army couldn't do and was too scared to do and wouldn't do. So sometimes when people are trying to measure you up and tell you what it is that you can't do, sometimes you got to run your resume and tell them what God has brought you through and tell them what God has brought you from. Yeah, I might have been a crackhead, but guess what now? I'm standing boldly for God. And what I learned when I was out in them streets was characteristics to be able to bring somebody else to God. So it don't matter that you've been in a church house all your life. The things that I went through in the streets are things that I'm going to need to be able to defeat this battle right here. So sometimes you got to run your resume on somebody and tell them what God has brought you through.
You better say a word. Come on. Run it.
So after David starts running his resume to the king gets convinced. And so now the king starts to want to be supportive of David. So he starts giving David his armor. He like, he'll put this on, and put this on, and put this on, and carry this. Because these are the things that you're going to need to be able to go and defeat Goliath. But I got a question. If the power was in the clothes, then why wasn't the king able to do it himself? If every member of the army had on the same clothes and had the same things and had the same weapons, then tell me why they weren't able to defeat Goliath when he needed to be defeated. So because David was humble and he was obedient, he put the clothes on. And remember, I got to tell the story the way I got it. So in my story, I believe David started trying to walk around in them clothes, and he's like, man, I can't even walk in this. Like, this don't fit me. This not me. I got the wrong clothes on. And so David, in my story, is like, thank you, King. I appreciate the support. Like, thank you for being up in your boy and thinking that now that I can defeat Goliath, but I'm going to have to do this the way I know how to do it. So when God is activating the power within you, you can't go about it. You can't go about his will dressed in somebody else's clothes. David is like, nah, man, thank you, but no thank you. I can't move in this. I'm going to fight God with what he's given me. And what he's given me is a staff and 5 stones and a slingshot. I don't need no armor. because I'm armed with the power of God.
Yes.
Your fight doesn't have to look like my fight. When God is fighting with me, I will use what he tells me to use and do it how he sees fit. It becomes effortless when God has activated the power that he has put inside of you. So something else that's important is there must be a need before you unleash or activate the power that you've been given. There must be a need. If you unleash it prematurely, it's just flexing. And it won't have the same impact that it would have if you had waited. So this is what we have the conversation talking about power versus ego. Power from God is when you're operating in the faith and God gets the glory from what you're doing. There's no physical training that's needed to activate the power of God. You can take a stone and a slingshot and battle against a giant and be victorious. But when you're operating in ego, you feel the need to have to prove yourself to everybody else. And you become worried about who's going to get the credit for what it is that you did. But when you wait for God to cultivate your anointing and unleash it when he says that you're ready and there's a need, you can literally bust the doors off hell and be able to walk straight through it and never be touched and never be harmed. Because God is telling you it's time for you to release what I've given you. And it's time for you to go to work. And it's time for you to be activated in the power that I've given you. So don't unleash your power prematurely, because you don't want to just show up and be just flexing. You don't want to show up and just be a show and you can't move mountains. You don't want to show up and try to speak to a situation and the situation look you dead in your face and say you ain't got no power. You can't move against me. You got to wait till God says it's time and activate your power so you can move mountains, so you can speak to situations, so you can loose things on earth and bind things on earth, so that you can shift the atmosphere when it needs to be shifted. When you walk through hell and you're unfazed, it's because you mixed God's word with your faith and activated his power. So this is the point when David moves to the front line. When you move from the sideline to the front line, it's now time to activate God's power. You will be tried on the front line. Your enemy will always underestimate you because they're looking at you in the natural and judging you based on your appearances. In 1 Samuel 17, 41 through 44, and I'm using the Message Bible interpretation because this point of it, I need you to really understand. And it needs to be clear as possible so that you can understand what's happening with David and what God is about to do. So in 1 Samuel 17, 41 through 44, it says, "And the Philistines paced back and forth, his shield bearer in front of him. He noticed David. He took one look down on him and sneered, 'A mere youngster, apple-cheeked and peach fuzz,' which means he ain't got nothing on him, he young, he ain't about to do nothing to me. The Philistine ridiculed David. 'Am I a dog that you come after me with a stick?' And he cursed him by his gods. 'Come on,' said the Philistine, 'I'll make roadkill of you for the buzzards. I'll turn you into a tasty morsel for the field mice.'" You know how bad the Philistine with Goliath talked to David? Like where I'm from, you can't just come talk to nobody like that where I'm from, because it's gonna be a misunderstanding and we're gonna have to go get out in the street and settle it where I'm from. And so I thank God that David is better than me, because we was gonna have to go ahead and get out there in the street. When you tell me you gonna make me roadkill, oh no, that's not how this gonna go. So you have to understand, David was a lot more humbler than I was, because I would have had to say something. So while they think you are not powerful because of how you look, God sees your heart and then he hits the activate button. When God hits the activate button, it's time to go to war. David says in 1 Samuel 45 through 47, "You come at me with a sword and a spear and a battle axe, but I come at you in the name of God, the angels of armies, the God of Israel truth, who you curse and mock. This very day, God is handing you over to me. I'm about to kill you and cut off your the whole earth will know that there is an extraordinary God in Israel. And everyone gathered here will learn that God doesn't save by means of sword and spear. The battle belongs to God. He's handing you to us on a platter. So that was his response. Because my response would have been, come on, player, let's go and get out there. Right? But David says, I'm coming to you in the name of God. You don't need a sword. I don't need a spear. I don't need a battle axe. All I need is the name of God. How many people know that when you call on the name of God, something has to change? When you call on the name of God, he's going to protect you, and he's going to cover you, and he's going to provide for you. And in your time of need, he's going to show up, because if he's put power down in you, he's going to activate that power in you, and he's not going to leave you hanging. And so in that moment, David is able to stand boldly and confident and say, I'm going to cut your head off. And not only am I going to cut your head off, I'm going to cut your homeboys' heads off too. And then the same thing you told me you was going to do to me, I'm going to do to you and your homeboys. And let that be a lesson to everybody else of the God that I serve. I need to know if I have some people in the place tonight that can stand boldly with God and look at your enemy dead in the face and say, I come in the name of the Lord. I need somebody to be bold enough to be ready to activate and cut the heads off demons and bind things on earth and walk in the will of God without fear and without self-doubt and without shame. I'm looking for somebody who can say, I ain't never scared. I've sat on the sidelines long enough, and now it's my time. I'm looking for someone who's ready to go to war in this next season and ready to activate. Somebody shout, activate. We know how this story ends. David is victorious over Goliath. Yeah. And he kills him with one stone and one shot. Yeah. I wonder if anybody here is saying, Lord, all I need is one shot. I may have messed up my shots before, but now that I recognize that you've activated the power within me, all I need is one shot. They may have told me, no, I ain't good for the job, but God said, I'm giving you one shot. My kids may be losing their minds and putting me through hell, but God said, all you got to do is open up your mouth, because I'm activating something in you, and I'm going to give you one shot. They may have talked about you, ridiculed you in the streets, and scandalized your name, but I'm telling you now that if God has given you the power and he's activated that power within you, all you need is one shot. One shot to say, God, I messed up, but I'm ready. One shot to say, God, I'll be a willing vessel, and all you got to do is tell me to go. One shot is all you need to bust hell wide open and speak to things as though they were, and call things out and be able to bless people and be able to bring over different things and war for people and go to work for God. All you need is one shot. When God activates you, you gain the power of influence. Your name will go before you. You will be talked about in rooms that you never set your feet in. People will be drawn to you, but don't know why. People won't understand why you're always able to come out on top. Think about your life, and you can determine whether God has put something down on you. Have you ever been counted out, but you were still victorious? Have you ever had a health scare and the doctor told you it's nothing else that we can do, but yet you're sitting here today? Have you ever been pushed up against the wall and you didn't know what to do, but because you are a child of God and God has instilled the power within you, you came out swinging and said, I come by the power in the name of God? If those are things that fit you, then that means that you've taken your one shot, and that means that God has activated something in you, and you are somebody that he's calling out to be different. Yeah, you may be smart. activated something in you. It's not because you're the fanciest or the flyest, but because you're walking in the divine activation of God. David saves the Israelites from the hands of the Philistines, and Saul still gets mad because David got more recognition than he did. They said Saul killed thousands, but David killed tens of thousands. And because the number didn't equate, and because David was getting more recognition than Saul was, David spent the next 15 to 22 years running for his life. And he didn't even do nothing but do what God asked him to do. He actually saved Saul and the people. And because he got a little bit more recognition for the activation that God did, he spent the next decade, 2 decades of his life running from somebody that was simply jealous. Throughout this time, God didn't send David back to the sidelines, but he did shift his assignment to make him even stronger for when he would actually become king. God has hit the activate button in some of you. It's time for you to move from the sidelines to the front line. You can't wait no longer. How do I know this? Because I'm looking at testimonies. I'm looking at people in this room that were counted out. I'm looking at people in this room that shouldn't be sitting here today because you should be 6 feet in a grave somewhere. I'm looking at some people in this place that had every odd that was known to man stacked against them, but you're sitting in this place today. So God is telling me that it's time for you to go from the sideline to the front line, because I got work for you to do. I got giants that need to be slain, and I got people that's dependent on you. Because what you don't understand is when David slayed Goliath, he saved and blessed his whole family. But if David had never activated and acted on the power that God set in him, then his family would have still been a nobody family. Because nobody knew who Jesse was in Bethlehem, and nobody knew who David was. But now, when you say David's name, he's one of the most spoken about people in the Bible. All because he took on the challenge of what God had activated in him, and he decided to walk in it. So God is charging you with something and saying that I put something inside of you. But not only did I put something inside of you, I pressed the activate button. And so it's a lot of you in this place today that God is hitting activate. And it's time to move. And it's time to obey. Yes, it's scary. I'm scared too. But God said activate. He said move. Yes, it's uncertain. You may not know what's coming next, but God said activate. And all you got to do is move. And I'll do the rest for you. People may count you out. People may say you crazy. People may say you acting funny. People may say you're being different. But God said, I called you for such a time as this. And all you got to do is activate and go. So the question is, are you going to accept the activation? Or are you going to sit down on that power? Are you going to make God do extra work and take the power from you and give it to somebody else? Because that's also a reality. That if you sit down on the power of God, God is going to put that need into somebody else, and he's going to transport. And then you're going to find yourself looking up later saying, God, what happened? God, I need you. God, I need you. I can't make it without you. And God is going to say, I already put the power in you, but you chose not to hear me. You chose not to listen to me. So how many people in the place today can say that God has been talking to you? You might not have been able to make sense of what he was saying, but all he's telling you is all you got to do is put one foot in front of the other and go. All you got to do is activate what's inside of you. I've given you the opportunity, and now you have the relationship, but all you got to do is speak directly to God. And so the question is, are you going to allow God to activate what's already in you? You say you come for a revival, but I'm telling you that God has already put it on the inside. So if you need to be revived, all you got to do is answer God and say, yes, God, I accept the challenge. Yes, God, I'm ready to activate. Yes, God, I'm ready to walk. And all I need is a rock. And all I need is a slingshot. God says, I'll bring preachers and teachers and prophets and apostles and people to go and get my people from out there. Everybody's activation doesn't look the same. You can be a prophet, you can be a prayer warrior, you can be a preacher, you can be a teacher, but the question is, the work is not going to go forward until you accept the activation. Are you willing to be activated today? Don't play with it though, because if you're activated, then that means that you have an assignment. And there are some people that are attached to your assignment that need you to be able to go forth and roar boldly and be able to stand confident and say, I come in the name of Jesus. And if you do that, no devil in hell is going to be able to block you and stop you from what God has for you. But you got to be able not to just stick your toe in the water. You got to be able to jump off the deep end and say, God, I'm here. And whatever you give me to fight with, God, I'm going to do those things. There are some people in here that's sitting down on their activation. There are some people in here that God has been talking to, and you keep questioning God, not because you don't believe in Him, but because you're scared. And I'm here to tell you, I've been moving in 2021 scared the whole time, but I said that 2020 was going to be the last year that I sat down on what God gave me, and it doesn't matter how scary it looks, I'm still going to go, and I'm still going to walk, and I'm still going to move, because God has activated something in my life. And if I don't accept the challenge, and I don't accept the activation, somebody else is going to lose out. Are there some people that standing here with me today saying, God, this is scary. I don't know what it is that you're doing with me, but all I know is I don't want to be left without you and not find out. I know there's got to be at least one person in here that's willing to accept the challenge and accept the activation that God is doing in your life. Remember, David was a common man, and God was still able to make his name great and do great things and bless nations and nations of people. And He can do the same with you. I shared my testimony before. I wasn't just scared of failure, I was scared of success too. And God is telling you it's time for you to be activated. It's time for you to come and recognize who He is and what He's put in you. So if you're a person that's ready to accept the challenge of being activated, and you need to be revived in this place today, the altar is right here. It's right here. But when you bring it to the altar, you gotta leave it here. A lot of us make the mistake of trying to help God out. He don't need no help. He said, I need you to let go so that I can slingshot you into your next season. He's ready to activate you, but all you gotta do is let go. He's big enough that you ain't even gotta hold a piece of it. All you gotta do is let it go. And He will fight that battle for you. He will move for you. He's in you because He's giving you the power. And it's time to accept the assignment of being activated.